p.m. Okay. We're here today to discuss the history of the church at North Charlestown Church of God at on Fulton Drive, on Edgewood and Fulton. Okay, so go ahead and tell me when. Start when you got saved. Okay.
Okay. Let me start like this.
Okay.
I was born and raised in Glasgow, Kentucky, on a farm 9 miles south out of town.
Okay, go ahead. Just keep on
I
talking.
came to Indiana January 1945.
Okay.
And got a job here in Charlestown at the old rocket plant this building did.
Go ahead. Just
I
keep
stayed
talking.
in New Albany for 1 month, boarded down there. Then I came to Charlestown. And then I met Esther.
When did you meet Esther?
In February of 1945 in the Midget Inn. That was a little restaurant here in town. She worked there. Then we started going together, and then we were married April the 21st, 1945.
Okay.
Then I told her when we were planning our marriage, I told her, witnessed to her about being saved and having a Christian home. Because at that time I wasn't even saved, but I've been raised up and been in churches where they taught. So in 1947, in January of 47, I got saved.
Okay. What about? Okay. You went up to the square and saw Leon Armstrong.
Yeah, I'll get to that.
Oh, okay. Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I got saved in 1947, in January of 47.
Gotcha.
Well, because we went up to Leon Thompson's house, and the ladies got a car, took a trip, and I stayed there with Leon, and he began to witness to me about about being saved, getting ready to go to heaven. And so he touched me. He got a hold of me. And that's what led me to the Lord Jesus Christ. And then after I was saved, now I was saved over in Louisville on my job. That's where I gave my heart and life to God at. But I come back, and on a Wednesday night I made a public confession in the little church at Market and Pleasant Street in Charlestown. And then Esther, she got saved on that Wednesday night. So that was in 1947. So then I worked in Charlestown for up until about 1949.
Now you said you got saved at your job over Louisville.
Yeah, I got saved on the job because I went to church on a Sunday evening down here at Market Pleasant. Had an evangelist there, was called Soulsby, J.L. Soulsby. And so in that revival that night, when they made the invitation to go forward, I, instead of going forward, I just left the church because I had to do one or the other. And I wanted to go, but I just couldn't do it.
Okay.
So
I thought you were working at the plant.
I'll come up to that.
Okay. Okay.
So then I went into my job the next morning. I was working over in Louisville at Logan Company. And I ran a conveyor belt upstairs, sending bearings to different parts of the plant there. And then I went in there on Monday morning. and I was under conviction, so, and I got up there by myself. I started to light a cigarette, and I just dropped it on the floor and just cried out to the Lord to forgive me, save me, and straighten my life out. And I wasn't all that bad, but I was bad enough I wasn't saved.
Right.
So then I come home, and I told Esther what I'd done, and gotten saved. She said, "Oh no, not that quick." That's what she said. So then, the next morning when I got up to go to work, I said my first blessing at the table the next morning. So then her and I went to the church on a Wednesday evening, as I've already said, and then she gave her heart and life to God. So both of us were saved then. We were baptized, and then I left over there, come back to Charleston or at Logan's, and I went to work back over to plant over here for DuPont. And so out there on the job, God helped me, and we won several souls to Christ on our job. But then, in 1950 or 51, I guess it was, I began to feel my call to the ministry. And so then I accepted that call, and I preached my first sermon down here at Market and Pleasant Street Church of God.
Okay.
In fact, in business, I had my first funeral at the Market and Pleasant Street Church of God. So then,
let's hold up for just a second. Mom's here. Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Okay, go ahead. All right.
now, I come home and told Esther that I thought God had called me to the ministry to preach.
Right.
And she said, "Oh no," said, "not you. Now you can be saved, all that, and go to the church, and I'd worked in Sunday school and everything, but I couldn't be a preacher." Said, "Not me, no, not you," but I couldn't get away from it. So for about 2 years, I just battled this. Whether to actually, and then I thought I couldn't either because I was married, had three boys. Bruce was born in 1950, and so this is in 51. So then I said to myself, well, I can't quit my job and go up to Anderson, and so then I kept on battling with this. God had his hand up on me. I couldn't get away. So one day I taken off work, went down in these woods down there, got down to a tree, and right there I prayed all day long. And it was just about the time the sun was going down, it was just barely shining on me, that I down in a tree praying to God. In fact, some of them heard me down there praying, and they went and told that I'd really lost my head over religion, and I was down there praying to the trees. And so anyhow, there by that tree, I got up, lifted my hands up to God. I says, "Lord, I accept your call right now. I'll go preach the gospel. But Lord, help me. Don't let me go for a while, run good for a while, and then throw up my hands and give up like I've seen a lot of others do." So I accepted it right there. So then I went to the pastor, Brother Newton, down here to Market Pleasant Street, and told him that I felt that God had called me to preach. So then me and Esther went to Glasgow on that weekend when I got back to town. He had made an announcement that I was going to preach my first sermon on a Thursday night down there. So I went down to that church on Thursday night at 7 o'clock to preach. And the little church only had seats for 90 people. Had the old theater seats in there.
Mm-hmm.
So I went down there for that to preach. I walked in that church, and it was almost full. Almost full. Now that wasn't on Thursday night. And so I knew that the people had come there, you know, just to hear me preach. And I went up on the platform and sat down. And it looked like every time I looked at that crowd, it's getting bigger. Here I am shaking all over, almost. And so, when Brother Newton called me up to preach, I can still remember the day. St. John, chapter 15. And when he called me up, start with verse 1. When he called me up, I walked over and put my hands up on that pulpit, and it just seemed like a veil fell over me. And for 15 minutes, I preached. And won my first soul was Nelson Smith's brother. You remember that? And on that night.
What was his name?
Kenny Smith.
Kenny Smith.
Yeah. So then when I was finished, stepped back, then realized what God had helped me to do. Well, I couldn't believe it, you see. I mean, he just, and now the calling is no doubt. I knew it, see. So then people began to call me to come preach for them. So I did, worked at the plane. And so then I took a correspondence course here at the house, from up at Anderson, for 2 years, wasn't it? When we were, 2 years. Now it's 4 up there, you know. And then you send your work back in, they graded it and send it back to you.
Now, what kind of degree is that?
It's just a, well, all of us. It's just a, I tell you what I studied. I studied Hebrew and Greek. Hebrew.
That's what you needed to be ordained.
Yeah, that's what. Oh, yeah, that's what I needed. I had to be ordained. Ordination, yeah. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, ordination degree.
Okay.
So I was after that, I left the plant in '48. Went through this, and then in September 1960, I was ordained in Indianapolis, Indiana, up there, and Church on the Rock. You've been there, ain't you?
I've seen that from the highway, haven't I?
Yeah, it's a big church.
Yeah.
Only they built a new church since then. So then I came back, and then in 1955, Esther and I were on our way to Bedford, Indiana, for revival. And we passed the old schoolhouse. Esther said to me, "I'd be a good place to hold a revival." But I didn't take it serious. I went on up there, preached that revival that weekend. And never forget this now. Back them days, a TV, they called that a monster with his tail sticking out of the roof. They was a no-no to a lot of them. So I had one. I bought myself a TV for the boys and myself, see. So we left the church, went home, stay all night with these people out there in the country. They're as nice as they could be. But oh my, while his wife and him and Esther was in there fixing us something, while me and him sat out there and talked, and he was really down on those TVs, you know. I mean, that's a no-no. And here comes that James through there, and I'll never forget it. He says, says my daddy told me to call him when Mickey Mouse is coming on. And I could have fell through the floor there and said, "James, I'm going to break your neck when I get you out of here, you know." You remember that, Esther. So then we come back from up there, had a good revival. When I got back in town then, I went to see Baptist Schoolhouse. And I'm trying to think of his name here in a few minutes. He was an attorney. Arthur Bly, here in Charlestown. He was in charge of renting that schoolhouse out there. So I went in his office and he said, "Well," I said, just too late. He said, "A couple is getting married and they're going to rent that, and there's already been somebody live in it because it had 2 rooms. It put a petition in it." So I said, "Well, if in case they don't take it, we'll call this number." So we got back down to the house there. Well, they'd called before I got there and said that the kids wasn't going to take it. So I said, all right, we'll take it. But 1 week to do a revival in. So I went up there to the church, and Leon Cox, you know Leon Cox out there. His dad and mom lived right straight across from where the old schoolhouse was at.
Remember, he's the old man that sat on the porch and waved.
Yeah.
You
Cox.
don't remember that?
Well, anyhow, yeah, he was always doing it. So anyhow, when I got up there, he was in there tearing that petition out. And I said, what's going on? Well, he said, I've been told there's a preacher going to come here and hold a revival, and I'm just getting ready for it. So he tore that thing out, got it all fixed up. After that, we got a piano in there. And
I guess Leon Cox owned it.
No, schoolhouse.
Oh, the city owned it.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So anyhow, Jim Henry Williams' mother had an old piano. We went and got it, put it in up there. And then we had some folding chairs they were lending to us till it was over.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I had a piano player. What was her name? Lived right down here on Pat. Well, let's put just put his name Pat. That's all. And she started playing piano for me. And we started that revival. And that revival, instead of going for 1 week, it went 3 weeks, and 71 souls gave their lives to God. And then after the revival was over, the people that give their hearts and lives to God, they had no church to go to. They didn't go. So they wanted me to start a church. Well, I didn't want to start one in conflict with the other churches. So I said, well, I will, but I'll hold it at 2 o'clock on Sunday afternoon when the other church is over. Mm-hmm. Started out, but then it grew to the point that they wanted morning and evening services with the Sunday school classes. So we started that. And there's a family in there by the name of Reardons. Their sons went up there to church. They sang. And so went to the Nazarene church. Mm-hmm. So they went down there and bought the first piece of property where we're at now and deeded it over to the church. Hmm. Now, the first church that was there was a 24 by 40, and it was named Faith Tabernacle. And
it was a block building, right? Cinder block?
Concrete block building. And so we stayed in that now for that same building. It's still there. Mm-hmm. Until it just outgrew it. I mean, the number, you just couldn't get them in there. So then we made a cross. I mean, put rooms out, the church was just a cross if you look down from the air. And up on the platform where the kitchen's at now, that's where the baptistry is behind. You remember that, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So then, in 1960, we built on to that. And that is there where the Sunday school superintendent's office and everything, where the old bathrooms used to be and all that. That was completed in 1960. So then we went on, and in 1960, we renamed it. And that's when the city annexed all this properties out in here, and we named it North Charlestown Church of God.
Is that the reason why? Because the city annexed it?
Yeah, we just changed it because of that.
What was this place out here?
And they named it North Charlestown. See, this is North Charlestown.
What was it? What was the...
Originally, this was called Cartwright Edition.
Okay, yeah, Cartwright Edition.
You remember, because Cartwright Edition, and the city, when they took it, they renamed it. In fact of business, we used to meet over here at Miller's Chapel Church and have meetings on what the name would be, and so we'd come up North Charlestown Church of God. And so it was named back there then, so we named the church North Charlestown Church of God. Mm-hmm. Okay. So then the church, then in went to 1975 in that part. And then the church had another growth. And it grew to the point where we had to build a new building. So the new church up there, we had a committee, got together on it. And so they talked about going out here by the school. They talked about where the old theater's at. You know, where the old theater, drive-in theater.
Drive-in theater out there where Overstreet's got it?
Right, Overstreet's got it now. But it was just such a price, we couldn't afford that, you see. So then we come back, and they said, we'll do it right here. Just put it on this piece of ground here. So we had the architect to draw it all up, finished it up, and they started that building in 1979, in fall of 79. It was finished in 1980, and we had our first service in that church on Labor Day, 1980. And so in that new church. And so that it kept growing until that building was filled. Then in 1990, we built where the new restrooms are at and all of that back there, and it was finished. And so that's where we're at right now. That's it. So we started the church in 1945, as you know.
1955.
I mean 55. So the year 05, 2000, that'll be 50 years old. 50 years old. And so me and Esther, I've been in the ministry, me and her now, 48 years. 48 years. 48 years.
48 years. Okay, so you started in 1954?
Huh?
You started preaching in 51?
51, I preached my first sermon down here.
Okay, 51. All right, so that's 51 years.
Well, yeah, but I'm talking about the church, pastor of the church. The church is 50 years. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'd be 54 years altogether from the time I started down here.
Okay.
Am I right on that? I think I
From
am.
1948.
Yeah, 2002.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
Now, I left the plant in 48.
Right.
And did you go to work anywhere else, or did you just go?
No. When I left there in 48, not 48, 58. I left the plant in 58. We need to correct that.
Because you did both.
Oh,
You
yeah.
had the church and the
I
plant
started the
job
church. I
for
was
the
still
longest
working.
time. Yeah.
Working for Food DuPont.
Right.
So you left the plant in Charlestown?
In 58.
In 58, yeah.
Okay.
I went back
but
there.
No, you left the plant in Charlestown when and went to DuPont?
I left the plant in Charlestown and when I first come up here. Oh, well, see, the war is over. And it began to shut them down. And so then I went over to Louisville, went to work for Logan Company. And then the government started up on the upper end, up there where the rocket plant was at.
Right.
They started laying that away and tearing it down because they never did do more to it. And so I come back over here and went to work for the government, went up there for them, and worked up there until they cut me off up there. Then in and I went back over to a place called, what was it? Something where I got that drum table in there. Oh, geez. I think I was with you then. I worked over there 3 years. When I went back over there. And in 1952, they opened this plant. And that's when I come back over here, see, in 52. But I started preaching in 51. Preached my first sermon in 51.
Okay, let's stop.
Do you want to go over it again?
Yeah, hold on. I gotta stop.
Beginning? Or what do you got there?
No, not from the beginning. Just
Okay, what do you got?
what the timeline of.
Where it was cut off there?
Where you worked at?
Columbia,
Okay,
Huh?
You
Wait a
came
minute, you came to Charlestown, right?
in 45.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
45.
Oh, okay.
Are you going to start there?
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, starting in 45.
Mhm.
Okay. Then I came from Glasgow, Kentucky to Charlestown in 1945.
Yeah.
And then I came over in Charlestown. I come to Louisville in January. It was on January the 1st of the year. And then I stayed over in Louisville that night. And then I came over here the next day and got me a job over here to plant. There's a building, that Rocketwood plant over there that
Yeah.
DuPont was building. So I went to work for them. And that was in January. I went back to New Albany and stayed down there then, boarded down there for one month. And then I came to Charlestown in February of 1945. Okay, then I went into a little restaurant they call the Midget Inn. And I found this midget in there, Esther. She was in there working there. And so I met her there.
Yeah.
Met her there. So I sat down at the end of the counter there and talking to her. And so she had a cup of coffee, so I talked to her and drank her coffee. See, that's free. You know, I goes, and then I asked her if I could walk her home. She's just living across the street.
Now, what about the Mary?
Didn't you meet Ann first? Didn't you
Yeah.
see Ann
Oh, yeah,
first?
in that restaurant there, yeah. I asked Esther who that girl was that come in the door down, and she said, that's my, what I said, how was that? I said,
You whistled?
I whistled, yeah. And I said, I'd marry the dog, you know, to get that family. And Esther said, that's my sister. And so she's reminded me of that, you know, quite often, ever since.
Did you and Ann work there together, or you worked there and?
Oh, me and Ann caged up.
Oh, worked there.
Worked there together. Yeah. So that's where it all begun. So then we started dating in 1st of February. We was married April 21, 1945.
Right.
There.
Got that.
So then, as I said a while ago, I talked to Esther about being saved and born again and giving our hearts and lives to the Lord. I even talked to her and told her, I says, now, me being lost, I wasn't a Christian. And I says, now, this is not for just a year or 2 years, but it's until death do we part. I told her that, you know, talking.
You guys only dated 3 months?
3 months.
Didn't even know each other.
Mr. May.
3 months.
And you were 20 and 15?
20, I was 20, she was 15. She would have been 16 in July.
And the judge, do you remember the judge at Major?
Yeah, we went to Jeffersonville, James T. Lee. Her mother went with her and signed the papers where she could, you know, marry me. And I was supposed to have been 21. But now God's forgive me for this, but I told something wasn't so. I said I was 21 years old, you see, and so we got married, and here we are, 57 years later.
Okay, and now, then you bought the house off Ed and Tessie.
Well, what we done after we were married, we stayed down there with Tessie and Ed the first night, and I don't know just how long, but out here where the school's at, the high school's at now, the DuPont company had come in here building a rocket plant. And they had a lot of trailers out there, just all over the place out there. So I went and put my name in for one of those trailers. And so me and her got a trailer out there and lived, I tell you where we lived at. Like if you went out Monroe and turned down on, what is that, street there to Church of Christ.
Park Street.
Park Street. And then go down and make a left going out to your mother's house.
Mm.
The trailer set just right
Is
at
that
the
right?
end of
They had
that.
trailers
Yeah,
sitting
I
there?
had them all over, back in over there where Roger Adams got all this. There's all over the place. But when the war is over, there's gone no time, you see. And so we lived there. And then
You got laid off.
I got laid off, and we after we got laid off, I got that job over there at Logan's, over there. Went over there and in the Logan Company and worked there for about 3 or 4 years. Well, I worked there up until about 1948, 47. So then, I come to Charleston and started driving a taxi for a damn wholesaler, and we called him Pop Rich back there then. And I drove the cab for about 2.5 years, and then I went over in Louisville to that, what's the Columbia Manufacturing Company in 1949, okay? And I worked there until 1952. And that's when the plant opened up again. And that's when I came back over here. I came back over here and went to work down there. Me and Nelson Smith went in there together. So I worked over there from 1952 to 1958, okay? Okay. Now,
That's when you went full time with the church.
yes, that's right. But in 1951 was when I preached my first sermon down here at Market and Pleasant Street, when God called me to preach, like I said. And so then I told you about taking the correspondence course, but so you've already got
So
that.
yeah, that kind of unravels all that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, right there.
Okay. Did we tell the story about the crutch, about when you were as a kid when
Oh,
you were
yeah.
walking through?
Oh, yeah, let's
and
go.
when you
All right,
had that
okay,
experience?
let's go back. Now, when I was 6 months old, when I was born, I had an uncle, Manson Wells, was a Baptist preacher. And my mom told him, says, I want him to be a preacher. I want me to be a preacher. She prayed for that, that I'd be a preacher. But then she came down with the old-fashioned tuberculosis or TB. And she took sick, and so she died in 1932. And so then, after she was dead, I used to go to bed as a child. I've been 7 in November. And I would think about the Lord, think about Jesus, try to figure it out in my mind, just what it's all about, you know, and lay there at night. And I would think about that. And then my uncle, Manson Wells, would tell me, he said, now, your mother wanted you to be a preacher.
And she'd gather you all around
Oh,
that
yeah.
chair.
And so Dad would be working on the farm, and when she was sick, she'd gather me and Dot and Cubby around her, and she would pray. And she'd have tears on her cheeks, you know, and I'd look up and wonder what she was hurting about, you know, all that. Have her Bible open. And so then I said in 1932, well, she passed away in September. And I'd have been 8 in November. Yeah, 8 in November. 8 in November. So then, my dad raised us there and kept us down in my grandma Cash. So then Dad got married again in 1936.
Now, didn't he bring a woman in?
He brought a couple.
What was? Didn't Mammy take care of you? And,
Yeah, my
the
grandma
lady?
Cash, yeah. Yeah, I tell you what we had. We had a black lady that come there and stayed with us in the house, did the cooking, the washing, and everything. And so, yeah, she stayed there with us. And so then when Daddy got married, and then he went back up to the other house, the one that burned, it was not there no more. So, because we was down in the big house. So they went back, moved back up there. But I went ahead and stayed with my grandma Cash a lot down there. Stayed there. Yeah. So then, talk about this. This is in my mind all the time about being a preacher, you know. And so me and a friend of mine, we played together from the farm joining ours. Well, me and him had been swimming. And so I left him, going on to the house right there where the one's there now, going across that barnyard there. And that's when something just spoke to me, and I was walking on crutches, or a crutch at that time, a crutch. And just seemed like a voice, why are you hopping along there? And I thought it was him. Said that to me. I looked around, there's nobody there. And I've told this before. Now, nobody else seen it. But it just seemed like a veil fell down over me, just around me like that. And I didn't realize it. And it was a frightening thing, And so I didn't even realize this. But I started in the gate and going down that brick walk, like I picked this brick up back in Mayville there. And my grandma Cash came out. She says, "My Lord, child, you can't walk." And here I was walking without my crutch, walking.
Did you say there was like a wind?
Yeah, something like that. Just just blowed. Just that's it. Never forget. I mean, I can't even begin to tell you. Can't begin to tell you. And so then after that, I never walked on crutches anymore. Until I went my first year to school down there walking on crutches or a crutch. Now,
was it tuberculosis of the bone, or what did you have?
Well, see, my aunt Joseph was supposed to have dropped me on a hearth, a brick hearth in front of the fireplace there. And my mother then had that TB too, you see.
Mm-hmm.
So then,
She broke your leg, didn't she?
I think it did. And then after that, you broke that leg, so they said. And they took me to Bowling Green, Kentucky down there. And they told me about it. And I began to have like abscess on my legs right here. There's a hole there right down, two of them on this. And so they said I would never, wouldn't live to be over 12 years of age, if that long, because another boy was like I was, and he never did walk. So they brought me back home, but then I started walking.
Did they think it was an infection, or did they think it
Well,
was
maybe it started from that.
tuberculosis of the bone?
There's TB of the bone.
Is that what they said it was?
Tuberculosis of the bone. That's what they diagnosed it, said it was. See there? But now I've had doctors checked up, Dr. Green, all I'm over here. They look at my bones now, and they said it don't even show whether I ever had anything like that. And I go back to say this: when God does it, He does it good. I mean, He don't, no sir, He does it all the way. I mean, and so it's just got to give you a new set of bones, I guess. And so that was it. Yeah. So.
But now you had those abscesses for many, many years.
Oh yeah, every year, fall and spring and fall, and I had to go back to the crutch, just crutches, all the time.
Until you were.
And then after that, I never had another.
And how old were you when that happened?
Between 11 and 12.
11, 12.
Between 11 and 12 years of age. That's right. And so that's just led right on to this. Now, even then, when I grew up, got out running around, why, the ministry, being a preacher, I was battling with it. On my mind all the time. I couldn't get away from it. And I went on, but now, I wasn't no bad boy, because I've always had a fear. You know, I didn't want to get in no trouble. I didn't want to get picked up and nothing like that. But about 4 years of my life, why, I get out with the boys, we'd party, just like all boys did and everything. Mm-hmm. And one Saturday night, me and J.R. Stewart, my brother-in-law, then, well, he wasn't, but he become that. And a couple of more guys, I don't know who they were. but it was in a 1940 Chevrolet. And was going out of Glasgow there, and that boy hit a bank with that car, and went off into the telephone pole there, and that knuckle on that hand is knocked down now where the broke right across there. And is that in that wreck, J.R. Stewart is sitting by me, and I wasn't thinking about what's going to happen because we went down that ditch and all that. But my thought was, I'm lost. If I die, I'm lost. And I knew it, see. And so then, see, that's what I'm talking about. These are the things that led up to this, all the way. And so I can see back now where God sent me to Charlestown. I met her, put us together. Put us together, husband and wife, put us together. For this purpose, I look back and see the whole thing now, the way that God's did it, you see.
Now, who was that uncle that was the preacher that, what'd you say, Mason?
Manson Wells.
Manson Wells.
Yeah, he's my uncle.
Is that
My mother's sister's husband.
your mother's
Yes.
sister's
Yeah.
husband? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he's a Baptist preacher.
Yeah, in that Baptist church that you guys went to.
Not that
Was
one.
it? Oh,
He had
okay.
another Baptist church. But we grew up down there in Glasgow at the Dover Baptist Church.
Dover Baptist Church. that's what I
Dover
was trying
Baptist
to-
Church, up there on the wall of the office.
But this,
And now in 1960, when that Barron County Reservoir come in there, they bought up all the creek bottoms that Dad had, and then they took that church, and then they moved up to Haywood and built a new one. So it's a new church. So I grew up in that church. Didn't know nothing else.
So Granville never ever saw this new church. He just saw the old one.
No, my dad. My dad was the last funeral that preached in the old church. Church, yeah. And so, yeah, and so he was the last.
now who was that elder that you mentioned?
Garland Powell.
That
He
always-
was an elder in the Dover Baptist Church, and he was sitting beside my mother when she died. And he's told me that over and over. He said that she told him in her last breath, Garland, see that my children are saved, you know. And and then Manson Wells would remind me of that God, and Garland Powell did too, that she wanted a preacher out of me. And Garland Powell, I'd go to Dover Baptist Church. When they made the altar service, that man would just come to me and lay his hand on mine and just go on, go on. So that night, when I was in that wreck and broke this hand, I went there on Sunday evening. They had a revival going on. And so, I had it in a sling. And the altar service, here come Garland Powell, little fella. Come down through there, just laid his hand on mine and said, if you'd have been where your mother prayed for you to be, you wouldn't be in that shape. That's all they said. Went on. And oh man, it looked like taking a sticking knife on me. They'd tear me up.
Now, in that wreck, was y'all drinking or were you just?
Yes, drinking. That's what it caused it. Sad. I'm sorry about that, but
Well,
it's true.
yes. There's nothing to be sorry
That's
about.
exactly right. Yeah.
And
When we were covering, when you guys drove out of town and saw that schoolhouse over there and you were going to
Yeah.
go to Bedford, isn't that where you had that dream at, Esther?
Esther Dream, yeah. Esther Dream up there.
Up at Bedford.
Bedford. That night she woke me up and told me, she said, we've got to go back to Charlestown and rent that building and have a revival, because if we don't, a lot of souls will be lost. And so it was so real, that's how come you come back. I never was big on dreams, you know. So we came back.
And you called Bly. And
That's right, went down, I went to it.
He said someone had already.
Yeah, this boy and girl was going to get married. They'd done been in there. And they was going to rent it.
Yeah.
But so then I told him, I said, well, if it falls through, why, just let me know. So I did. And so when I got back to the house, he done called so we could have it.
Then the only thing I
About
don't,
Grandma saying about becoming a Sunday school teacher.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And so after we were saved, Arnold was a little baby. Because I got saved 6 months after Arnold was born.
Where's she going?
He's the mentor. So, so me and Esther had him laying on the bed. And we got down beside the bed praying, remember? And you said to me, she said, wouldn't it be a wonderful thing if you were to be a preacher and I could be a Sunday school teacher? Yeah. All that was leading up to it. I mean, the thing of we was working together on this.
I just, yeah, all
Just,
fits in
just
together.
God just putting everything together.
Whole thing.
Everything together.
Then, the only thing I don't remember hearing is the story about the potbelly stove.
Oh, yeah, in the schoolhouse?
Yeah.
Yeah, out there in the schoolhouse, that big old hot-bellied stove set right in the middle of the floor. And it was a Saturday night. And that building was full, standing around the walls. And
We were looking in the windows.
and people looking in the windows. They're standing looking in. I mean, had the windows up. People standing there. And the street out in front there was blocked. And Woodward, you remember Woodward, the state policeman?
Uh-huh.
He used to come out. He came out there and got the traffic out of the way so they could get out there. And I was up there preaching, and so I just finished. And people all over that church, I just prayed for somebody, I don't remember just which it was. But anyhow, the people in that building just shouting, just praising God all over the building. And all at once I looked and see the puff of smoke and that stovepipe let loose up at the ceiling coming down. And that floor just kept going on down. And it just bowled out, and it bolted down. And people just kept on shouting and praising the Lord. And there's only one person that was frightened, and there's a little blind woman there. And she didn't know what was going on. Yeah. And so, that night, people said, well, it's over now. But I tell you what, that was on Sunday evening. And the next Monday evening, the men was in that church now. They ripped the floor out of that building and put new under it. And on Wednesday night, we was right back there again, going.
Speaking of, wasn't there a little old lady that came to the church one time and you said you looked back on it and you thought it might have been one of the angels unaware?
Oh, Esther, right here.
Yeah.
Down at Market Street Pleasant Church, Market Street Pleasant
Right.
Church of God. Now, Esther and I was new Christians. So, we were late. She had a toothache, wasn't it? And all sure her tooth was just killing. So we were late. So we got down there and started into the church. And this little lady standing over this side, to the side. We had to walk up the step to get up in there. So she looked over, Esther said, child, what's wrong with you? And I said, she's got a real bad toothache. And she just did the same word, just laid her hand on Esther's jaws. And the toothache went. So it's all, it's new to me. So I went inside. And she come in and sat down just inside the door. She sat there, and I looked back. Because I never experienced nothing like that. And I would look back, and so she sat through the service. But when the service started to make the altar service, I looked back, she was gone. And nobody had ever seen that woman before, and nobody ever seen her since. Angels unawares. Yeah, right there.
Didn't you go to a mental institution?
Yeah.
Some kid, I can't remember the story.
I went to Madison
Okay.
up there. Oh, yeah. went up there. That woman come to the church up here. Her mother.
Some woman,
Yeah, come up there.
just a woman.
Yeah, I can't remember the name now. But and she went up to Madison. And I went up there and visited that girl. And then she brought her down here. She's a grown woman. I mean, and right there at the church up there on a Saturday night, God touched that girl, delivered her, and there's no more trouble after that. She never did go back. She went back, but she was delivered out of all that. Yeah. I can't remember her name right now.
What about the miracle with Linda Stoner? Something with Linda Stoner?
Linda Stoner.
Remember somebody being healed? Do you remember that?
Dorothy Cash. Dorothy.
Well, my sister,
Okay.
she had cancer. And we went down there and brought her up here. And the Mayo Brothers Clinic couldn't give her up, said she couldn't live.
Okay.
And we brought her up here. And she would sleep in the day and lay awake all night. She couldn't sleep. So I went down to Jeffersonville and William Branham. And he come up here and me and him prayed for her. Or he prayed for her. And God touched her. She was healed of that cancer. Never ever had no more problems with that. She died like on the head. So, yeah, my sister, yeah. Now, let's see. Talking about Linda Stone.
Seemed like there was something.
They,
There was a boy named Stanley Stone. I don't know if that was Stanley Stone. He died early, didn't he?
oh yeah, he was up in Indianapolis in a hospital. And I drove up there to see him, but he had a kidney shut down and all that. He died.
Stoner. I don't remember anything about that.
I know they kids. Linda and all of them went to church up there.
Right.
And I heard Linda, and I tell you who it was Linda and Sissy up there. Sissy, they used to come over there. And on a Saturday night when I had those healing services. And they told me that they'd come over there and see things that happened there, you know. I said, we'd just go home scared to death. Scared to death. They'd see things like that, you see. Now, one day up there, on a homecoming day, they rolled a little lady in there in a wheelchair. Parked the car out there. And God touched her right there. She walked out of there and pushed the wheelchair, drove a car off the lot, and never ever again. We've seen a lot of that. Seen a lot of that. Seen a lot of that.
That's all I can.
You think anything else, Dave? Okay.
Sounds good.
All right.
If you got anything, well, holler, we'll.
All right.
The first church that was built there, the little block church, it was free of debt when we went into it. Because, and the sweetest thing about that, it was the people in Charlestown that gave money, like Dr. Eli Goodman, and there's a bunch of women went around. And so then the men of the church built it. So it was debt free. Then we built on the back. And when we done it, it was debt free. So then when we went into this new church, one Sunday I started raising money up there. And I did it just like God spoke to me to do it. And so I had these cards made up where people could pledge. But they wasn't bound to that. If there's sickness or out of a job, you know, they were automatic. If they couldn't do it, just give us the card back so we know where it was at. So, one Sunday morning, I stood up there in that pulpit and raised $47,000. Yeah. And I forgot how much of that was cash. Brother, Mr. Cooper out here, what was his name? Will Cooper. He wrote out a check for money, and people just wrote out checks for money. And so So, and then when I got through making that, raising money, then me and Esther and Alan and Neville and Dishaw was leaving, going to Florida. And I never will forget that. Peck. What was his name?
Manny Peck.
Lenny Peck.
His dad. His dad was standing in the door when I went out. He said, "This is the first preacher I ever seen that raised $47,000, and now he's on his way to Florida." He laughed about it. He said, yeah, and we did that. But then that money began to come in, and we already had 60-some thousand. So when that church was finished, it was paid for. And the bank right here in Charles, we went down there and borrowed $100,000 and put it in escrow. So then I thought, oh, wait a minute. Why don't I just put that in over here in the bank, in checking, and let it draw savings.
Yeah.
Because laying in there,
Right.
we wouldn't do it. And I think the interest rate at that time was 7 point something.
It was high.
High.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyhow, I cut the rate half in two by doing that. We was drawing this.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. You probably borrowed it at 15 and probably was getting 7.5. That's
Yeah,
the late
exactly,
70s. early
that's
80s.
exactly right.
Yeah.
You're right. Something like
Yeah.
And so, instead of spending our money too, it was also drawing interest. So we're spending theirs
Right.
and drawing money on it all at the same time.
Right.
So, when we got through, well, we just went down there and gave them the money back. And they said, "You are the first one that ever did this. Nobody else ever thought of that." And you see what I done? I
Yeah.
took and put that money to work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can remember
Yeah.
when we were going to have a deed burning, mortgage burning,
Mortgage.
mortgage
Yeah.
burning,
And so,
and we were $800 short.
well, that was, now that was on when we remodeled the fellowship hall, oh, that, and.
We were $800 short,
Right.
and Bob Williams stood
That's
up.
exactly, wrote out
Yeah.
a check for it.
Yeah.
And that's when we bought the old, Lord Williams's houses and all, and gave $50,000 for them. And in 3 years, we paid it off and had
Okay.
and that's right.
Okay.
And Bob Williams wrote out a check, and by the way, I just got a check from Bob Williams this week, we're going to offer $1,500.
Wow.
$1,500. Talk to him. Yep, that's what, and so actually, the church really's never had no debt. Really.
Right.
Had that one there when we,
Turn around and get it back to
when we
them.
bought all that property there, and I
Right.
paid $50,000. But the money began to come in, and just like you said, we burnt the mortgage like $800. That's when Bob Williams kept it. Now
Can you think any other miracles off the top of your head?
Oh, Brucey.
Healing?
Healings all over, yes. We've got people in the church up here right now that's living. The doctor said,
Oh, yeah, Sherman was healed.
oh yeah, Edith Sherman. Now, I seen it, but nobody else did, I don't guess. But Edith Sherman, what was her wrong there? I was standing in the pulpit, and I saw this. Just looked like a light, or a halo, or something like that. And I shook my head, and it looked like it was going across that room. And when she got down there to where Edith Sherman was at, it just stopped right there. And now this is frightening. So I want to make sure that I just didn't think I saw something.
Yeah, imagine it.
I seen something. So then after it was there and it wouldn't move, I called it out right there and I said, "Over you, Edith, right now. There's a light." And prayed for her, and she was instantly healed right there. Never
What
again.
was she? Do you remember what she was
testified.
suffering?
Yeah, she had testified. You remember what it was?
No, I can't remember.
Yeah, she was. Oh, yeah.
What about when you would go up on the square and preach?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I started out and
You're gonna have to drink water.
what is it?
You just
In
go
the
ahead.
old schoolhouse.
You want ice?
Well, I used to go up on the square And I got something else to say too. And I go up on the square and preach. And I had a 55 volt, and I had a speaker on top of it. And it would, I could use a battery, a 12 volt battery, or electric. I could switch it. And I'd go up on the square in Charlestown and preach on Saturday afternoons. And then I would leave there and go to Madison up there and preach up there. And they'd just come and in there, just come on in there. Yeah, I did all that traveling around. But then, one time back there in about 1960, it was 1960, I had rented a tent. And I was going to rent it. But the pastor is pastor of the 18th Street Mission in New Albany, and I held a revival. And I went to get his tent. He said, no, you can just have it. I brought it up there and put it up, and they helped me. People did in the church. And when you looked up, that thing was as holy as it could be. I don't know why they put it up, because it wouldn't help water. And I started a revival under that tent. And I don't know it was the first night or the second night.
Up on the square?
Up on the square in the schoolyard there. I looked, I said, this is the holiest place in town. I said, if you don't believe it, just look up. You can see all that way out, you see. And they all laughed, you know. And so it was there in that tent. I was in Ashland, Kentucky that year earlier in a revival. And we was on radio every day. And they had a weekly TV service too, going out over in West Virginia and all. And so I come home on the weekend, and then they wanted me to come back. I was there for 1 week. They wanted me to come back and go another week. And so I come home, went up to church, had services here, and then I left and went back. Well, I got back there, and the preacher of the church, his parents owned a restaurant and a motel. And I was staying in their motel and eating there at the restaurant. So I went to the church to do a broadcast. Went up there every morning. Don't remember, down 10 o'clock. This preacher, I can't think of what his name was.
Amazed.
No, that's the one that come here. But anyhow, when I got up there to the church, started at the door, and I seen this motorhome sitting out there, you know, to come in, had Ohio license on it. So we went on in, and they did it from the platform of the church like ours up here. So he come in and sat down. And he was listening to the radio, or it might have been on television. Now, I wasn't there, but the pastor told him what's going on because I come home on the weekend. Mm-hmm. And so his name was, what was it? We called him Mays, Brother Mays. Anyhow, he was mashed in a coal mine. And he couldn't walk, only on crutches, things like that. So that night, we met him that morning up there. I shook his hand. And he owned a bus lines, a city bus line, up in Akron, Ohio. And he'd heard it. So he drove from Akron, Ohio, in that motorhome, and pulled in there, and stayed through that revival. So, he sat through 2 or 3 services. I went back in, we just started the services. Singing was great, Spirit filled the room. And he stood up on his feet. He says, God has told me now, if you'll pray for me, I'll get well. I'll be healed. And no hand was ever laid up on him. When he said that, he walked out. And off of the crutches and cane, I don't know whether they had one crutch or one cane, whatever. But he walked down those aisles after all those years. Walked down the aisles. And he stayed then till the revival's over. And so then he would go from Akron to Florida to spend the winters down there. So when I got that old ragged tent up here and put it in the yard, why, that's the summertime now. And he was down in Florida, and he told me just like where he was at his fishing on a Saturday night. And he said, and I got up that Saturday night in that tent and told him I was going to get me a tent. Because I was praying right over there in that door on a Friday night, and I was wanting the tent. And so I was praying and had the doors open, and the people heard me. Well, anyhow, I went up there on Sunday night, I guess it was, and told them, I said, I'm going to get me a tent. And I did, as some of the board members in the church up here, they said, we can't buy him a tent. I was scared him to death, you know. I said, the good Lord told me I was going to get a tent. So they began to do that, so then the crowds got bigger. And so it went on until a Thursday night, I think it was. It was Thursday, because we went and got groceries, me and you gone. Bruce is just a little boy. So we come back to the house, share these groceries. And Bruce come out and told us that Daddy's a brother Mays here. He's up at church waiting for him. Well, that name jumped out at me, but I forgot about him being up there. When I got up there, he was up there in the church on the back side. Had his camper pulled in back there and everything. And he sat down and talked to me. And so me and him sat there and talked. So he said, well, I'm going to stay around. Said, do you care if I park up here? I said, no, Pud McDonald, the chief of police. I called Pud and told him he's going to be sitting up there, you know, in the motorhome, you know. So he started coming to church. And so I had a battery, wasn't it, bad in my car or something. Yeah, it was a little bad. I had a 59
Yeah.
and he just went over and bought a new battery and put it in. Had it done. So then after that, Esther's sewing machine. Well,
I didn't have some.
no, you didn't have one. And he went and bought her a new sewing machine, and what all this was.
Just a sewing machine.
Well, anyhow, I come home, Esther said, I feel like I've been to heaven. All these things happening, you know. So then he took me and went to Jeffersonville, down to a tent company, and bought that tent. Had it brought up, set up on that lot right over there. Right over there. And paid for it. Paid for it.
Bruce, you can remember that, can't you?
Yeah.
And also, we got chairs and everything.
What amount of time had passed between the time you got healed and the time you bought the tent?
Oh, I'd say about a year.
Okay.
About a year. And so then, he's seen that I had a for sale sign in my yard, going to sell it. The house, to build a bigger one, on account of the kids. See, this used to be a bedroom, done right there. So, so he said, what's that sign there for? I said, I'm going to sell it to get one big enough, bigger for the family, you know. Didn't know it. He went and got Silas Roberts, and some of the other board members. Went over at Memphis. There used to be a lumber company over there. And he brought an engineer over here, somebody, looked at this thing and figured it all out. Next thing I know, all that lumber's coming in here. And he paid for these rooms. Everything. Did all that. And then he wanted to make his will to the church up here. And Mitty Smith come out there. And Jack Ricehager come out there. He wanted to give me part of it in the church. I don't know what he had. Couldn't tell you. So I told him, I said, brother, I said, you're too good. And I said, if I was to take that, I said, if you got a family, and he did have family somewhere, I said, I could destroy them. You know what I mean? Because here I am taking. So he just made it over to the church. Mitty Smith and Jack Ricehager was out there. But then he left. and I never heard of him anymore. Never. So I'm sure he changed that, or maybe his family had him to change that, you know. And yeah, so I never ever heard of him again.
How many years have you been preaching on the radio?
Ooh, gee, you see. I started doing radio in
For a long time.
1960. I guess 62. Yeah.
1960.
40 years.
Yeah, 40
You did
years.
it for 40 years.
I thought longer than that.
No. I was on Bruce, you are right. I went to Salem. We went up there in 1950,
We used to go for reading on
Yeah.
Sunday.
about 56 or 57.
Well, that's pretty small.
Started on that station up there at Salem. Was up there for a long time. Then I come down here and went over here on that, what is the name of that radio?
XVW.
Huh?
The XVW.
Well, no, I've been on that, but it's still over there in Louisville. It's a
XLN?
XLE, WXLE, no. What was the name of that?
KLO,
No,
Wacky,
no. I was on a station down in Jeffersonville,
yeah.
but over there in Louisville, it's a big radio station. And,
I remember WXVW.
yeah. And then I was on a station down in New Albany. But over there in Louisville, I was on it every day, 7 days a week. And then that guy that was the manager of that, he's the one that put me on the air over here. And he had a heart attack and died. And then Eddie Sears, you remember Eddie Sears?
Oh, yeah.
Eddie Sears was in there with him. He stepped in there and took over then. So then Eddie gave up that over there and come over here and bought this station over here in New Albany. It's sitting outside up on a hill there. So I went up there. But that station's still over there in Louisville. Right?
Is it?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Because I was on, and I can't think. Me and W.L. Rogers and all those guys was on this station. And I had a fellow by the name of James, who's a lawyer over there in Louisville.
Yeah.
Robertson.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he come over here, and he'd come be on that radio station with me, and he'd just want to pay so much of the price, and then we'd just sit down and have a talk program like we're sitting here all talking, you know. Me and Esther went out to his house. He lived out there, Lord, he had looked like a mansion, had an elevator. Remember that? You just step into it, take you all the way to the top, and back down. All of that.
You want that deal out there,
Yeah. And he represented William Branham when he got into trouble with the IRS, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I think a couple 250,000 or something like that.
Big money back in.
Yeah, big money back then. And
You're big bad in me now.
yeah, but he represented him in Chicago with the federal government up there. Yeah, and no, WFA.
FAI.
WFI.
WFIA, yeah, that's the station we was on, man. It going out, you know.
Right.
And then I was on 2 stations up in eastern Kentucky. I'd make tapes,
Mm-hmm.
send them up there. So, but Russ Manship, that was the manager's name when, and he had a heart attack. He'd been over here and preached for us, and Eddie Sears did too. And they all come over here.
Well, I know one time you used to tell me how you'd go without sleep. You'd come home from work.
Oh yeah, when I
and
worked
then
over the
you'd
plant.
go up and preach.
Yeah. When I worked over the plant on the swing shift,
Yeah.
and so as after I started the church here,
Yeah.
little schoolhouse,
Mhm.
and so what I've done, I've worked the 12-8 shift,
Mhm.
and then I'd come home at 8 o'clock like on Sunday morning,
Yeah.
and then I would go up here and hold my services here at school, And then over in Henryville, a Neville Tabernacle was over there. And I'd go over there at 2 o'clock and hold services over there. You remember that, Esther? Then I'd come back here and go up here, hold one on a Sunday night.
Right.
And then I'd come home, change clothes, and go home, go to work, and come home on Monday morning. And I'd go from Saturday, I've had a Saturday night service too up there. And I've gone from that time until Monday morning.
So you go from Saturday
Saturday,
morning till Monday morning without sleeping?
that's right.
And you go to work and
Go to work.
preach? And how many years do you do this?
Oh, I done that, I'd say, about a year. Because I was put on a straight day shift then for the maintenance and all. And I done that. And I couldn't sleep here. Because people was coming knocking on the door and I'd been up all night. And we used to go to Old Tisco up there to Sonny Jones's mother and dad's house. And don't you remember that, Ruth? And I'd go back in the back bedroom and sleep. Nobody knew where I was at. Yep.
Sonny and Vera and
Yeah, I've seen the time I put my car behind the house to hide it. So I could go in and go to bed, you know, because you just couldn't do it.
I did that one day.
What?
Yeah, but the police was after you.
I put the car behind there one day, fleas was following me in the yard.
Oh yeah, he parked out there behind me. I had to go out and get him out of trouble. State trooper.
Now, tell us about when Russell and Josie took you to Illinois.
Oh, that's Russell telling all that stuff. He said when he brought me over the Ohio River Bridge out of Kentucky into Indiana, said I looked back and said goodbye United States.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, United
Goodbye, old US of A.
States. Yeah, he's like Bruce was last Saturday. And when that waitress down there saw that woman just winking at me, said she's working with me all the time.
How old were you when Russell and Josie took you up there? And do they take you about every summer?
I'd go up there. Me and my sister Dot, they were down home, so they wanted us to go home with them. So I was about 12 years old. 12, me and Dot.
Hey, Arnold.
Well, look at there. And so we went up there.
We're recording history.
So me and my sister Dot, we went up there, and I stayed with Joseph and Russell. And then I come into town, of course, still and all there. You've been there. And thank Ruby, and I couldn't get a job because I was just a kid. And I started setting pins in the bowling alley. And I set pins up there.
Set pins in a bowling alley.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Set pins in the bowling alley. So they had
Okay.
Sorry about
Are you
that.
okay?
they had a curfew. Curfew, you know how cities used to have?
Mm-hmm.
They used to have one here.
Yeah.
They had a curfew up there. Anything under 12 years old had to be off the streets. So I would set pins that bowling alley, and so they would excuse me for that, you see.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember this one night, after I got off from setting pins, why, then they're still playing, still bowling.
Yeah.
And so, I was out and wasn't supposed to be out. And so here comes the cops and me and another boy. And I ran down through that bowling alley and went out the back door, and I forgot about it. There's a drop that high, like back in a truck up too. And me and him both run off that thing right down into this old coal, where they burnt coal then, and those old ashes and all that out there. And I fell right in it all, but I got away.
Now, what about the time you went to the little girl's house and fell in the slide?
Oh, that was down in Glasgow. Me and Harold Cooper, my first cousin, who was a midget. And he said to me, and then I was about 11 years old, something like that. So he says, come on, Junior, so we'll go over here, so I know where there's two little girls at. Well, I didn't know the girl or nothing like that. So they had that popcorn, had those rings and the popcorn, you know, you're seeing a popcorn ring, rings and something.
Oh.
Yeah, Cracker
Oh,
Jack.
Cracker Jacks.
Cracker Jacks.
Yeah.
Cracker Jacks. So I had that little ring I got out of Cracker Jacks. So here I took that ring and went over there, you know. Me and Harold is. He's a little midget. They had a step going up in the kitchen. We went in the back door. I don't know why. We went in through the kitchen. And that Harold just jumped up there like bounced like a ball. And so what I done when I started in, my foot slipped on that step going up, and they had what they call a slop can, 5-gallon bucket.
2 days.
And I went right down in that thing with both arms. And that girl's mother wound up giving me a bath instead of seeing her. And I was so embarrassed. So several years afterwards, in about in the mid-60s,
It ain't been plugged up.
I was preaching and holding revivals. And so Jack Rigsby, his home church, his Methodist church down in Gladstone, they had a watch service. Had a quartet to come in and we'd come down and preach the midnight service. So I went down there, and Aunt Junie and Harold, my cousin, they're all in, was there. So they're sitting back there, and so they motioned me to come back. So I went back there where they was at and talking to them. They said to me, said, "You know this girl here?" I said, "No, I don't think so." "Yes, you do too." I said, "I don't think so. I don't think I've ever seen her." Harold said, "You remember where you went and found slop cans?" "Yeah, girl." Said, "That's her." And I just made a joke. I says, "It says, don't run from it because you have to face it again someday, you know." And they all laughed, you know. Yeah. Gee whiz.
That's about it.
All right, time Junior lifted all that, took off that Christmas when that door shut on him, he left it in the house.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I think everybody's heard that.
You want to tell it?
Well, I can tell it. Yeah. It was Christmas time, and we've been up to church. And Esther had a shade lamp thing that was sitting on that table in there. Had that ring around it like that one right there. She took it in there and set it behind that door. Right there. So, Darlene was a baby. I don't know why I stayed outside. I don't know if the kids got inside or not, but I know Esther had. So she went over there, she turned the light on, went over there and pushed that door open. What'd you do that for, Esther? Well, anyhow, when she throwed it back, you know, that ring around there, just she throwed that door right back to their face.
I remember that.
And she come out that door flying. Somebody's in that house. Somebody's in that house. Left Darlene in there. So I come in the house, went over and pushed that door back, and man, it slammed back in my face, right back out I went. Sure. I said, "After you go in there and get Darlene, you left her there." Yeah. So I went and got me a brick, and I was going to come in here, you know, and all that. That's when I come in, though, and hit that door. That thing shut back in my face. I don't know what happened to the ring. I went back out the door.
Left Darlene in here.
Yes, yes, Darlene.
All right.
Okay.